explain in words, but essentially imagine a shipping container, truck rocks up, drops it off on site, install some rails, and then we roll out the panels, and then the system can be up and running in less than half a day with just 2 people. Right. So the fundamental behind the entire system is that it's built into a standard 20-foot shipping container, so easy to move around globally anywhere where you can get a shipping vessel, a truck, etc. And with 2 people, in a couple of hours, you've got a solar system up and running, batteries, inverters, energy management system, and it literally can be packed up again and moved, or even you can add additional systems to scale it up and down. So applications across agriculture, construction, mining, even short-term use like events, festivals, and the likes. So hopefully that gives you guys a better idea of what we do and how it works. And yeah, so a bit of background on myself and my founding team. So the Phoenix essentially is founded by 3 people. So I'm one of them. The other two, Joel and Ben, we've actually been working together for going on our 11th year now. Coming from a background doing mining, oil and gas, and really looking at deploying like systems into remote locations. So 3 years ago, we started Phoenix because essentially on all the remote sites that we're on, you just see diesel generators everywhere. And the biggest problem with why most people can't move away from diesel generators is because there isn't an equivalent renewable or clean solution that can be picked up, relocated, moved around, scaled up and down like a diesel generator can. So yeah, so we set about coming up with ideas for how we can do that, essentially offer the flexibility and the mobility of a diesel generator without having to rely as heavily on a fossil fuel powered energy source. So looked at a couple of ideas. We settled on, look, it has to be something that can be movable and easily located in move to different locations. You can ship it globally. So a shipping container is what we settled on, and then the rest was essentially the whole design process of how do we get as many solar panels into that footprint as possible, and incorporating a battery so that we can also have power overnight. Or in instances where there isn't sun available, right? So, yeah, over a couple of months, we designed the system, and we were fortunate enough that we got selected by Engie, the French multinational energy company, to go through one of their accelerators as part of a essential venture build process where um, they kind of gave us, a 3 to 4 month period to really flesh out the idea from how does the system work, who are our customers, what is the problem we're solving for them, what is the solution, what will the business model look like, and how do we generate revenue, and how do we retain customers, and etc. And obviously how do we scale. So at the end of that process, we got investment, and then recently also just closed our second funding round, which is our seed round, with a multitude of investors from Engie again to LaunchVic to a couple of VCs and corporates as well, and from Australia, New Zealand, and one from the US. So that's kind of what we've been doing over the past, I guess, three years now. And yeah, I think the tie-in from a high level, at least before the question started, is essentially, I mean, a big part of what we do is the energy management system, monitoring and monitoring and data analytics and everything that go into how the system performs, what it's doing at any point in time, and how do customers benefit from the data that we generate from what we do, but also from what they do. Cool. Yeah, I guess I'll open the floor for some introductions from the cohort, and then we can jump into some questions.
Yeah, awesome. Great. Thanks. That's a fantastic background, Mochi. Really appreciate it. Mike, you're first on the sort of bubble. Do you want to sort of introduce yourself and your background and pop it over to someone next?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Wichi. Mike Young. So I've had most of my career actually in enterprise IT, basically as in sales, so account management, business development for large U.S. IT companies. And beginning of this year, I made a strategic decision to transition into climate tech and trying to figure out how I can leverage my skills and learnings from the world of IT in the world of energy, particularly renewable energy, and looking at just how a lot of the concepts that have already been leveraged in IT, particularly around the move to distributed assets, applies to energy. So my role in the cohort is as kind of the strategic commercial person looking at the business model, and it sounds like the program you went through with energy is pretty similar to what we're trying to go through here with our cohort. Actually, the defining a market, and figuring out a value proposition. So yeah, keen to pick your brain.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. You want to introduce
Andrea, you're next.
Nice to meet you, Weiji. I'm coming with a background from renewable energy, but from a different side. I've been delving more into recruitment, a little bit in wind industry, solar and battery storage. And over the years, I've noticed I actually would like to do something even more useful, if possible, within the sustainability aspect of the industry. That's how I ended up with the project. I've been doing this for a few years, but still, I'd probably say I'm at the very beginning when it comes to technical aspects and things like that. Initially in the cohort and the project, my focus was supposed to be on high demand skills for different types of systems, from residential to CNI to large scale, and to try and discover what are the technical skills lacking that would help Diagno upscale. But as it progressed with the cohort, now I'll be looking into the efficiency of the diagnostics tool and how that's used with the contractors, and I guess the feedback that they can bring from there to help both deal with faults finding and implement a better service to then lead to better customer satisfaction and ultimately upscaling. There's only one more person to choose. So Paul, if you'd like to go next.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Yeah. Hi, I'm Paul. I'm a software engineer. I've got a background in spatial and mapping and robotics and other web apps and software, and I initially come into the climate stream wanting to look at software projects and building apps, and looking at Diagno as a software platform, and I was initially looking at wanting to do sort of some of the sort of analysis that they do, like with the time series diagnostics. As we've gone along, I've kind of bent more around to the larger questions around target focus customer and strategy, and so I put forward a proposal to say we should focus on the contractors and service providers as a kind of first tier customer, and then onwards from there to sites. And so we've been sort of having quite a lot of discussions the last couple of meetings around do we go after sites and then try and find contractors, or do you go market this platform to being a sort of service for contractors for their own usage for their own customers? And I think we'll come full circle with that and be like, okay, there's some software aspects that you could, that like white labeling, that you would do if contractors are the focus. Thanks. Pleased to meet you, AG.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Yeah, great to meet all of you. And Yeah, I guess we can get underway with the questions. Alex, do you want to, I guess, go through the question and then I'll try and answer?
Yeah, no, that sounds great. So we had a few questions come through from Mike, and then we also had a few questions come through from Naomi, who unfortunately can't make it tonight. So what I'll do is I'll hand over to Mike to ask his questions first. And, you know, Paul or Andre, or, you know, as always, feel free to raise your hand, jump in. You know, it's pretty organic. So I'll hand over to you, Mike.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Alex. I mean, I've got the questions there. I give you the context. I guess Alex sent you the questions, obviously. So,
Yep.
I guess the first one was really around the, you know, the Diagno's trying to set up this network of independent contractors that, you know, they're not trying to, as we've fleshed out through this process, they don't want to own the independent contractors, but they want to have a relationship with them where they're potentially, you know, vetting them and scoring them. So I guess from your perspective, yeah, the question is about, you know, what do you see as the most, you know, critical elements for ensuring quality for your customer? And I guess once you've deployed your solution, which looks really cool, actually, I really love that idea of the shipping container, and you roll it out. And just a sort of a bit of a segue. Sorry, is that meant to be like a permanent installation, or is it always temporary?
It can be for both. So the rapid deployment aspect, if it is for the case of permanent, just means that there's a, you know, that we significantly reduce the time and cost on site for installing these, because typically these would be going into quite remote areas. So logistics, labor, and everything involved in getting people, equipment, and materials to site is quite expensive. So even if it is for a permanent installation, it helps with reducing the upfront capex on that. But primarily also, I mean, really looking at how do we have something that can be just as easily moved around as a diesel generator, whether it's there for a couple of months, a couple of years, it gets picked up and moved. So really applies to I guess both applications.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, you go ahead.
No. Nothing much from my side.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess so. With that, I mean, it's quite a different scenario to, I guess, what we're looking at with Diagno, really, because, like you said, there's not like there's service providers you could call on. You would be quite specific because it's so remote, I guess, in terms of how you would do maintenance on that product. So let me ask another question, maybe not one here now that I know what your solution is, but do you guys like monitor the performance of the environment? I mean, presumably because it's so custom built, you know how much energy you're supposed to be getting out of that based on a sunny day, I assume, do you?
Yes. Yeah. So a couple of, I guess, factors that go into the monitoring side from us is, yeah. So first and foremost is when we actually start the proposal process with a customer, we actually look at, you know, their site, their energy use, and profile that. And from that profile, we can look at, you know, historical weather data from the sites, from available weather stations, from the bureau, etc. And then we can then map out, you know, what system we need, what configuration will suit that site, and then what is the predicted performance. And once the system's actually installed on site, so what we do is then so the remote monitoring side is pretty much as simple as, you know, how much energy is being produced and how much energy is being used and whether that's being used as optimally as possible. So what I mean by that is, you know, a lot of people, like, let's say farmers or some people in the construction side, they're used to peak and off-peak rates. So they might stagger the use of equipment and specific things at different times of day based on how much power costs at that point in time. But if they were, you know, if the bounds of peak and off-peak power use were removed, what is the best way to use energy in the most efficient way? So we kind of help them make that transition as well, and that's part of what the software and the monitoring does. The other side of it is essentially for service and maintenance purposes, right? So we can look at the performance of the solar panels, the batteries on a panel by panel, cell by cell basis. So we'll know quite quickly if there's an issue. Let's say solar panel 124 is only producing at 80%, whereas all the other panels are producing at 95%, then we know there's something wrong with that panel. Either it could be as simple as a bird pooed on it or something, to maybe something's hit the panel and it's cracked, and it's not producing as much as it should. Same with the batteries, cell by cell, how much charge it's holding, how it's discharging, things like that. So that helps us with, for one, is actually what our predictive maintenance cycles look like, but then also, rather than having reactive maintenance, we can preempt things going wrong. So if we start to see small issues, small anomalies in the performance, we can preempt a catastrophic failure or a critical failure by performing preventative maintenance. The first step from our side is probably also inform the customer that, look, hey, looks like there's something wrong. We're monitoring at the moment. Can you give us an update on what it looks like on site? Is it just bird poo on the panel, or is it damaged? If it is, we'll send someone out to come repair it or replace it, essentially. So that's kind of the level of monitoring and control that we look at, from a diagnostic point of view.
Right. Okay. Cool. And do you aggregate your systems at all? Is there a do you have the opportunity to create like VPPs or anything like that across multiple grids? Have you had that situation, or is it usually one-off sites that you're looking at?
Currently one-off sites, but there is a plan ultimately down the line, once we have pretty much, let's say, a critical mass in specific areas, to start working with the local power companies to look at putting together a VPP arrangement. So some of the conversations we've had with let's say Essential Energy up in New South Wales, looking at putting in systems across multiple remote areas, and once we have a cluster, that can then form the basis of an initial VPP network.
Yeah, which for somebody like Essential would be just add a bit more reliability to the work, and provide, like, are you looking at it from a grid stability perspective then? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. A bit of both. So from the perspective of Essential, they're looking at it from a grid stability point of view, but we're more so looking at it as first and foremost, a value add to our existing customers, but then also providing let's say more retail customers with the option of buying into renewables without having to put systems on their site. So for example, let's say we reach a critical mass of dairy farmers in Colac, for example, and they're producing a large amount of excess that they're not using, and their neighbors aren't using. They can actually export that into the grid, and then and that can go to the actual residents in the town of Colac for them to use. So ultimately down the line, that provides additional a revenue stream, but also value to our existing customers, and then also allows us to unlock a customer base that doesn't necessarily fit the original profile of someone in a very remote area having a big piece of land. They might still be able to buy into what we're doing.
Yeah, it essentially becomes a community battery.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Oh, that's very cool. I like that. Okay, cool. I think Paul and Andrew, you guys had some questions in the chat there. Or Paul had a question in the chat, and then Andrea had a question.
Yep.
I heard a hand up, I guess. So, Paul, do you want to ask your question? Did you have a question there?
Yeah, well, I can see the questions in the chat, so I can answer them. Yeah, so 5B does come to mind. The main, I guess, differentiating factor between us and 5B is 5B are looking at utility scale. So what they call ultra low cost solar. So what they're aiming to do is essentially make the construction of utility scale solar as cheap as possible. So essentially getting as many solar panels into a square meter of space as they can. Their design also differs in that they use an sort of a peaked or an A-frame design, whereas ours is parallel frames. So we prioritize getting as much peak solar as possible. So essentially generating as much solar when the sun is at its highest point in the sky, or etc., and being able to store as much into a battery as possible. So some differentiating factors there. The other side is we're not targeting utility scale. Our kind of sweet spot is, anywhere from 30 kilowatts worth of solar up to maybe 2-3 megawatts, right? So much smaller scale, but we call that kind of the missing middle, which is essentially the gap between your residential or urban rooftop solar, and then on the flip side is kind of your gigawatt, solar farms. So we're looking at that gap in the middle where our customers either are on the edge of grid or are off grid, but rely on diesel generators because they have what we call nomadic operations that are always moving around. So I guess relative to Diagonal, or what you guys are looking at is, I mean, the monitoring side of things becomes quite important because unlike a utility scale solar farm where we have one location, we in over the next 3 to 5 years we might end up having hundreds of locations, right, with monitoring all across. So that becomes an important side of things. I guess tying back to one of your original questions around contractors or people that you work with, in terms of how do you build trust, and how do you, I guess, ensure quality, right, and consistency with your contractors. So one of the main things, to be honest, that we actually look for initially is when we go into an area, or when we talk to a customer in an area we've not been in before, the first question is, who's your local electrician, who does all this upgrades, who's put in your hot water system, who's done your switchboard. So first and foremost is finding someone that the customer already trusts, and working and trying to get them involved in that. The second part is actually working with people we've worked with before. So I mentioned we've been doing this for about 11 years now, albeit kind of pivoted from fuel systems to renewables, but a lot of the people we've worked with before, from electrical contractors to guys doing comms and software to manufacturing, are still the same. So a big part of that is building trust and a relationship over years at a time. I mean, they're I'm not going to say that the first people that we worked with have always been the best. We've had to chop and change quite a few times throughout the process, but I think once you find the ones that you can rely on, continue to work with them, give them incentives to continue to work with you. For some of them, they might become sales agents or distributors, or they might have a commission for introductions to some of their existing customer base. So providing incentives, but also building trust. And then on to Paul's second question is around who buys the system, and direct or through distributors, wholesalers, retailers, etc. So I guess I did touch on that briefly in terms of some of the contractors or the local entities that we work with. If they have the capacity, we typically try and work with them on a distributor basis. So they become our local presence, let's say in Colac or in Narromine, or wherever we deploy systems. Whoever is local and knows that area well, and they have firstly, I guess, credibility and the trust of that community over there, we typically try and work with them. And so as far as becoming distributors, not so much wholesalers or retailers at the moment, primarily distributors, or at the very least a sales agent who might help us with introductions to leads, etc. And our current revenue or business model is two streams. So one is either a direct outright sale to the customer, or the second is a finance sale. So we do have two finance partners that provide essentially financing for us. So it's very similar to if you were to buy a car on finance, right? So it's looking at monthly repayments, and we structured our finance such that monthly repayments for farmers actually means that they're not out of pocket at any point in time. So no upfront deposit, no balloon payments, and we actually match monthly repayments to what they're currently paying for energy on a monthly basis. So essentially, relative to our customers, all they're doing is they're just taking what they're paying for energy right now and switching that across to monthly repayments for the system that covers their energy needs. The bonus of which is after a 7 or 10 year period, they own the system and it's free energy. So that's currently, the model that we've been working on. Hopefully that answers your questions, Paul.
Thanks very much. And Andrea, do you want to jump in?
So you're mentioning the remote monitoring system, and that you also use that for preventative maintenance. Do you have a bit of a comparison with Diagno, as in you can already do most of the monitoring for your equipment, but it's at small scale and only focuses on the panel performance? Or how do you see Diagno being different? Or where is the value, I guess, from your perspective?
Yeah, I guess relative to Diagno, I think Diagno is very useful in terms of for, I guess, anyone that doesn't have the monitoring capability as part of their integrated package. So part of what I guess our value add to the customer is we provide that full turnkey solution where they don't have to go to one company for solar panels, another for inverters, another for batteries, another for the software. We essentially provide them with that full solution. But I do see a strong use case for how Diagno could be used, which is essentially if we're looking at residential, commercial, and industrial, where you might have just your sort of run-of-the-mill solar installers that go in and put in a solar system, on a factory rooftop, right? How does the customer get an idea of how much energy they're generating, what sort of savings, even looking at things like emissions reduction, emissions abated, etc. So I didn't touch on this, but we also do look at that side of things ourselves. I guess related to one of the questions that was asked through or sent through email by Alex was, which sort of metrics do our customers find valuable, right? So I guess to answer that question, it depends on the type of customer as well. So our agricultural customers, they're probably not, they don't care as much about the carbon's emissions or abated side of things. They're really more interested in, am I getting good value for money for the system, in terms of how much, what is the usage rate of the energy that the system produces versus how much I'm actually using and versus how much is being lost. So let's say something like a 90% efficiency rate between how much energy the system produces versus how much is actually being properly used is something that's more important to them. And obviously the next thing for them is there an actual cost savings that aligns with what you've promised, right? So a part of our diagnostic and monitoring capability is also to keep ourselves accountable. So for a lot of our customers, obviously we have performance guarantees around we we guarantee that our system will cover 90% of your energy use with a, let's say, 5% margin either way. And the monitoring tools and software that provides them with their data keeps us, I guess, accountable for that performance as well. And yeah, I mean, if you're then looking at towards the larger, more corporate type customers, they might be very interested in the emission side of things, for a couple of reasons. I mean, there's there's the carbon credit certificate market, where that might be something that's important, and additional value chain. So I mean, if customers have systems that are bigger than 100 kilowatts, then they obviously get access to LGCs and all that. So potentially the software can then provide them with the data to be able to do that. And then that I guess ties into one of the other questions, is in terms of what sort of compliances, certifications and things. I would say the carbon trading market is probably a big one to look into, because there is a lot of potential for that. I mean, just as an example, off the top of my head, someone with, let's say, a 500 kilowatt system on their rooftop, or one of our systems doing 500 kilowatts, on one of their sites, can probably generate LGCs in the region of about 50 to 60 grand annually. And they have the option of either, so essentially the system on an annual basis generates certificates, right? Carbon offset certificates that they can either keep to offset emissions in other parts of the operation, or they can actually sell them on the market, right? So there's the two options there. So potentially, let's say, let's take an example, Rio Tinto, right? They put in 20 systems with 500 kilowatts each, generates X amount of carbon credits, and what's more important to them is their carbon footprint. So they won't sell those; they'll keep those to offset carbon emissions in other areas of the business to bring them down closer to net zero. So I'd say one of the important things to look at is compliance and accreditation with organizations that look to trade in carbon certificates. That's probably one. And then probably then also your energy providers, right? So like your Origins, AGLs, and Alintas, in terms of getting their buy-in around the measured performance of the system versus what their metrics are for either feed-in rates, if you have a customer that's large enough that they can take it, that they can look at start, I guess, what do they call, arbitrage and load balancing, where they can actually generate a revenue stream from that as well. Just making sure that their systems and the metrics and how everything is measured is in compliance with the things that they look at. So things like battery systems that are installed, whether they comply to what's called FCAS, which is FCAS, which is to do with the frequency response of how the battery responds to requests for either pushing out or pulling energy in, etc. So things like that around either the carbon credit side, or even the energy provider side, just to ensure that there is compliance, such that your customer that is running Diagno can take advantage of that. So essentially value add to what Diagno already provides. So it's not essentially creating a new function, but it's essentially just ensuring that the existing functions comply to those additional potential value add streams. Paul, you had a question?
Yeah, when you mentioned energy retailers, do you mean in the context where the system's been put into the distributors, or by what do you mean by like a agricultural mining customer that the energy retailer still gets involved in apart from just feed in? When you mentioned energy providers, energy retailers, what context was that in?
Yeah, that would be more for the end customer that's actually using the system, not so much the distributors. So essentially, but that would be, I guess, a compliance of Diagno itself in terms of the metrics and the I guess the tools that they use to record or monitor energy coming in, how much carbon is abated, just ensuring that those metrics and methods comply to the, I guess, the governing bodies that oversee these activities, just so that essentially, I guess, put it this way, let's say there's a large mining customer, they start using Diagno, and instead of having to then get a third party to accredit, how much carbon has been offset for them to get certificates, they can do that directly through Diagno. So let's say Diagno provides a report that is compliant to the SDC governing or carbon certificate governing body in terms of how they measure. That makes that process a lot easier, but then also I guess makes the reduces a lot of the friction along the way for the end customer to be able to do that. So those are things that can provide a lot of value add and obviously, differentiate Diagno from some of the competitors in the market as well.
Just picking up on that, actually, would you need to have partnerships with those sort of those sort of third party bodies in order to sort of show that it's compliant, or like how would that sort of look like, do you think, on the platform from that point of view?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the avenue in which the third parties, I guess, fall under. So for example, if it's carbon certificates, that's not specifically regulated by a single body, but there are a lot of organizations that can provide, those certificates. So in that case, it might be worthwhile partnering with one specific organization, and they provide all the accreditation for the carbon certificates. On the energy trading side of things, in that probably would be more so like your AMOs and things, where they have very specific compliance and regulatory requirements for anything that is feeding into the grid or providing arbitrage for assets on the grid as well. So it depends on which aspect. So on the carbon side, probably, yeah, like a third party organization that has the ability and track record of trading these carbon credits. And then on the grid tied side, where you're looking at trading energy on the grid, that's probably more of a regulatory body like AMO.
Yeah, that makes sense. Does anyone else have any sort of questions, or?
Yeah, I got one. Just with all of the data that you're collecting, have you looked at monetizing that data in any way, like in terms of just the data itself, rather than using it for each individual operation, but actually turn it into some kind of an aggregated data set that you could sell?
Yeah, that was actually one of our original considerations. I guess the strategy right now is it's probably a lot more valuable to us in the sense that let's take agriculture and then narrow down to dairy farming. So as we grow our customer base in ag and specifically dairy farming, that data becomes a lot more valuable to us in terms of we can provide value to potential new customers. For example, we're currently let's say if we're talking to a new dairy farmer, we can say, look, we've already got a network of 30 dairy farmers across Victoria. We know how they use energy, and these are the things that we've implemented to optimize how they use energy, provide them with more savings, more value add. Let's say, just as an example, we've done recently is a dairy farmer heats they always heat hot water at night because they're using off-peak rates. But what they're doing is they're trying to heat 1,500 liters of water from 20 degrees up to 95 degrees in one hit, and that is extremely energy intensive and very inefficient. But they do that because it's cheaper to do. It's cheaper to do so if they're paying for power from the grid because they're using off-peak rates. Once they switch to our system, we noticed that energy spike, and we said, well, you don't need to heat hot water in that way. Just try set the water heater to how it normally functions. Is essentially just keeps topping up and maintains the temperature. And just from that change, they're now using about 25% less energy to heat their hot water every day. So that 25% energy can translate into either a cost saving, or it means that they have additional capacity to use it in other areas. So that data set becomes very important to us, because the more of those we have, the more value add we can provide to our existing customers across the board. We did consider, look, what does it look like if we were to monetize that by selling insights or that to as an additional revenue stream, but we've so far or currently decided we'll keep that in-house and use that as a tool for ourselves in terms of how do we provide value, but then also incentives and things to our customers, to new customers, but then also kind of keep hold of existing customers as well. So that becomes valuable in the sense that let's take Apple as an example, right? Maybe 15 years ago, everyone went to Apple because they had the best stuff. I think most people that have stayed on Apple since then is not because they have the best stuff, but because Apple has all of your data, right? They've got, all your photos on the cloud. They've got all your emails. Everything is in that ecosystem, and it becomes there's a lot of friction for someone to switch from Apple to Android, because it's a huge change in terms of they have to move everything across. So we see that as a strategy for us to essentially pull in new customers, but then also retain existing customers.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, try and create a moat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because for Diagno, I guess they're in a different scale of customers probably. Like if they can, at a residential level, if they can get tens of thousands of customers, then that aggregated data, it's less meaningful for an individual customer, but becomes more valuable at scale. So I think that's kind of what my thinking was.
Yeah, no, that look, it depends on the scale as well, and what you're looking at. I mean, yeah, for us is we jokingly always had a saying is, you create a moat against customers leaving and people stealing your ideas, and against competitors, but in a similar way, you should also make boats so that you can bring new customers across the moat.
Yeah.
So yeah, boats for moats, kind of thing.
Boats for moats, yeah. And you guys want to own the boat, so I get it. That makes sense. You keep the data.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, very cool.
From a service provider sort of perspective, if they were to sort of use Diagno, we sort of like floated this idea last night of like a Diagno verification. I think Mike sort of coined that term off the back of an idea that sort of Paul put forward. If Diagno can sort of be the platform that essentially verifies the quality of the individual contractor, like they're able to sort of build this track record of certainly providing a high quality service rate, and a lot of the assets that they service are compliant with, the relevant bodies, and maybe unlock additional kind of pieces of value in the value chain. That would be a pretty compelling, value prop as like an all-in-one, sort of solution for a service provider. I feel does that sort of make sense and resonate?
Yeah, that does. I mean, it's for customers, it also reduces the, I guess, the friction, because I mean, generally people are lazy, right? They prefer getting everything they need from one location. So I guess in the same way, in terms of what we're doing, we're trying to provide the full end-to-end solution. Diagno can do the same in relative to what they do by reducing as many of the pain points and things for the customers as possible. So essentially, a customer can go on the platform and they already have a list of providers that have specific ratings. Maybe one has the best response time, one has the best customer service, one has the best workmanship or quality, or whatever that may be. That I guess provides value to the distributors and partners, but then also provides value to the customer in terms of they don't then have to then separately go onto Google reviews or whatever it is and individually look up all these providers and what they do, what their reviews look like, and all of that. So definitely a lot of value there. We're part of our philosophy is literally just make it as easy for the customer to make that decision as possible, right? So for us, in terms of when we provide a proposal, it's we will do everything for you. All you literally need to do is sign this contract, right? Sign this contract, and then we will take care of the finance, we'll take care of the manufacturing, we'll do the install, we'll set everything up for you, and then you won't even notice that that you're using energy from our system now versus grid versus diesel. Is just it should be all as seamless as possible, because essentially the quicker you can get a customer to make that decision of this is I'm gonna use this because they've made it they've made it so easy for me to make that switch, to make that jump. That's probably the biggest thing. So anything you can add value to, and any place where you can reduce friction for the customer making that decision is very critical.
Does anyone else have any other questions? I've got one more. I wouldn't mind asking.
Further to that point, the full service, the full product, the full install and maintenance and finance and everything as a package. I guess from one of the questions Diagno has been grappling with is if you do bundle everything in, then your scale out is then if actually contractors end up being your bottleneck, that you need to, because you referred to earlier, like, okay, when you expand into a new area, you'll have trusted contractors. And is that a have you felt that bottleneck where it's like, we wish we could sell 100 systems in Darwin, but no one knows an electrician in Darwin. It's like it's chicken and egg problem where you can't just
Fortunately,
whereas a software as a service a software as a service can be like, oh look, we just got sign-ups from people in Whoop Whoop, and
no, that's a great question. I think fortunately we're not big enough to have that issue just yet. But we part of, I guess, the strategy we have in place is essentially where we do start looking, or we do start encountering bottlenecks. As we grow, we will obviously then supplement specific areas where let's say the contractor or the distributor just no longer has the capacity. We would then start looking at supplementing that with our own people in those areas. If we do get to that point where we see the need to reduce these bottlenecks, I think it's relative to the costs involved and the potential revenue from that. I think we can quite easily justify then start putting our own boots on the ground in these areas to either support the existing distributors, or either look at bringing on additional distributors, or even looking at potential JVs, right, in these areas where we might work with that distributor, set up a JV model where we might split the costs of bringing additional staff and people on to be able to cover these additional distributions.
It's quite possible that's kind of the question that we're tackling with Diagno, is they've got a number of customers. It seems like quite a lot. I mean, it's relatively, but then the scale out wants to be starting that, wants to solve those problems, and so it's sort of it's this sort of like hire. Do you hire? Do you contract? They're sort of all the questions, and even this sort of distributorship. I guess where you say distributorship of your system as a product, I kind of see that in Diagno as being like this kind of contractor as a customer, where they're kind of a customer distributor, or they're kind of helping to kind of scale out that network, and kind of being in place to kind of do the boots on the ground maintenance that's going to come with when a system has been diagnosed to have a fault.
Yeah. So essentially, I mean, the model for, I guess, your distributors and customers would be they get value add in terms of they're the ones that pick up that revenue. If there is a call out or service maintenance and whatever, etc. So I guess it's also in their interest to provide the resources to be able to scale and grow that out as well.
Yeah, I got a question as well. Just thinking of it, one of the options we're looking at is just how Diagno can enable its service providers or the installers with their diagnostic tool, and almost give it to them for free as a upfront health check that they can run. In your experience, do you find that electricians and your service provider partners that you're working with, do they have those monitoring tools today? Is there anybody out there doing anything like this, or are they just showing up to site and monitoring it the way that they've always monitored it?
Probably the second one, where most of them don't, but that could potentially just be also a factor of the areas that we work in, being sort of more rural and remote, as opposed to more urban and industrial. But yeah, from what we've seen, most of the people we've worked with, they don't really have a lot of diagnostic tools and software available, and that's probably also why we strategically decided to have our own tool bundled together with the entire system, so that they don't have to then go to a third party to do that, especially if it's I guess the other factor is sometimes our systems might be installed in really, really remote areas, so very hard to get to, and sometimes it might be the customer themselves that picks up the problem, and they need to go and service and maintain or repair the system if required. So that's also why we decided to have that as part of the package.
Yeah. Okay. Because that's where, I guess, from a Diagno perspective, one of the things they're looking at is if they can do health checks before it saves a double truck roll for the for the installer, because so often they have to go out there, do a diagnosis, and then inevitably need a spare part or something, then have to go back and then schedule another session. Whereas if they could show up with the right part and fix it first time, it's a better customer experience and significantly cheaper.
Yeah, definitely. There is definitely a lot of value in that. And yeah, like having the the contractors on board with that obviously is benefit to both, right? That additional customers for Diagno, but then also the contractor that actually services specific clients then also optimizes their operations.
Exactly. Yeah, that's one of the key plans. Okay, cool. Alex, sorry, you had a question. I think I'll hand it over to you.
The only last question I was going to ask, I think you mentioned previously, and we might call it after this because we're hitting time. You provided like a quality guarantee. You mentioned, I think, with your sort of systems. I was just wondering, like, how exactly that sort of happens, and if you've ever sort of like run into difficulties with that.
Yeah. So it's essentially I guess we call it a performance guarantee. So it's basically our system on your site will cover 90% of all your current existing energy use, with let's say 10% still coming from grid or diesel. And if we within any 30-day period or any month, if we're outside of if we miss that by more than 5%, then we will essentially rebate them the equivalent difference in cost. So relative to us, it's a minor. So someone paying $2,000 per month for energy, and we're covering 90%, so 1,800, and we miss that by more than 5%. It's $150 for us. But that gives the customer that kind of, I guess, assurance that we've got them covered, kind of thing. We haven't had to do it yet, so that's good. But it's partly also because we're very conservative with how we size our system. So we're using bifacial solar panels, but the rating that we publish on our systems does not include the bifacial factor. So that gives us a bit of buffer as well.
Yeah, awesome. And then I guess just one little last, would you say that that's something that's been a differentiating factor in getting customers over the line, that performance guarantee?
Yeah. Like I'd say the performance guarantee, and then also for a lot of our customers, it's the fact that we provide them with that full solution. So again, that the whole reducing the friction, they don't need to find someone to put in a battery for them. They don't need to find their own software. They don't need to find their own financing. So that plus the guarantee that if the system doesn't perform, we'll cover the out-of-pocket costs, for you in that situation, right? So that has been quite important for getting some of our customers across the line.
Yeah, awesome. IT, thank you so much for tonight. Really appreciate your time and insights, and sort of, for me at least, it's crystallized a few things. I don't know, I can't speak on behalf of everyone else. But yeah, just so amazing hearing your insights and sort of what you're doing in building Phoenix and engaging in this space for such a long period of time, and all the progress you've made. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Alex, for getting me involved. I'm always happy to help in whatever way I can. If you guys have any questions down the line, happy. If you guys shoot me an email or something, I'll try to help where I can.
That's great. Thanks
Thank you, Richie. Very interesting.
Yeah, great to meet you. Yeah, great looking business. Good
Likewise.
luck with that.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers. Bye.
Yeah,
See ya. Bye.